Aren't you troubled by multinationals and the size of companies? And that's not what Adam Smith meant. Adam Smith didn't mean for Exxon to have a 60 and 70% profit.
If you had, first of all, of course I'm troubled by multinationals, in the sense that I would rather have a world in which there were a larger number of small companies. The issue is not that. The question is, what are your alternatives and how do you promote such a world? One of the major reasons you have multinationals and large companies now is precisely because of the role which government plays. Here's Chrysler. Get back to it. The chairman of Chrysler is spending full time, has hired a whole group of lobbyists in Washington. He is engaging in a political campaign to get the government to bail him out. Mm-hmm. Now, is that a productive use of effort? If he weren't doing that, if he isn't bailed out, will the effect be that Chrysler will disappear? Not at all. Most bankrupt companies come back into operation with a new management and a clean financial slate and are more efficient. The fact that Chrysler goes bankrupt doesn't mean that his factories are going to go up in smoke. If they're worth using, they'll be bought by other people to be used.
Like GM?
And in fact, you'll have a strong... They might be.
Doesn't that bother you?
As compared with what? As compared to have the government own the factory and produce it?
Can Sears buy Kmart too?
Of course.
You think so?
Sears has been one of the great protectors of the consumer all during its existence. As a matter of fact, you say, can Sears buy Kmart? The way Kmart has been growing, the question is going to be, can Kmart buy Sears?
Yeah. All right, but
that's an example. Now take that.
In other words, you want the Justice Department out of this too, huh? I mean, you don't have any problem at all with a
The most effective antitrust measure you could take in this country would be complete free trade.
And the biggies will eat up the little ones?
That is not
We've
true.
already seen the demise of them.
Excuse me, that has never happened. There have been very careful studies made of what has happened to the concentration of industry in this country over the past 100 years. And except in those areas where government has stepped in, it is not true that the biggies have eaten up the smallies. In fact, it's often been the other way. And Kmart is a good example. It started from nothing. Sears was already a major conglomerate. Mm-hmm. And Sears has been losing ground and going downhill, and Kmart has been rising.
All right, just going back. Here's the killer, though. When somebody does come along with a better mousetrap, the multinational mousetrap company buys it. Oh. And now we're back to mediocrity again. And the initiative and the talent of the little old man in the shoe shop who came up with a better is gone.
Temporarily, there are new people coming up with the little old men in the shoe shops. And one of the major reasons, as I was saying before, why multinationals are able to occupy the position they are is because government rules and regulations favor multinationals. Almost all government regulation favors big companies over little companies.
And you think Exxon ought to be able to buy Reliance Electric?
Of course.
And what else you want them to buy? The hotels too? I mean,
well,
where are we going to stop?
Look, if you say to Exxon, look, one thing we're going to do is to make it impossible for you to make any money producing oil. What do you think their stockholders
have a hard time getting the American people to agree with that type of thing?
First of all, Exxon doesn't buy anything. There isn't any Exxon. There are people. Exxon is a corporation owned by individual people. It's the stockholders of Exxon who ultimately are buying it. And if they don't like what Exxon is doing with their money, they have a perfectly good alternative. They can sell the stock. And as the stock went down, if the stockholders didn't like it, it would pay somebody to change the policy which Exxon is following. We have a far greater degree of control over what Exxon does than we have over what a lot of our government corporations do.
Nobody believes in democracy. You will find it hard to find anybody who will say that that is democracy interpreted as majority rule. You will find it hard to find anybody who will say that if 55% of the people believe the other 45% of the people should be shot, that's an appropriate exercise of democracy. What I believe is not a democracy, but an individual freedom in a society in which individuals cooperate with one another and in which there's an absence of coercion and violence. Now, it turns out that democracy, in the sense of majority voting, is an effective means for achieving agreement on some things, on things which are not very important. Really important things, we require much more than a simple majority. we require something as close to unanimity as we can get. That's why we have a constitution as well as legislative law.